gonna die. I don't know if you noticed, but this year kind of sucks. I know that for most of my generation and a bit of the olds, I think people have been saying this year sucked since like 2012. Technically, every year sucks because no matter how hard we try, the world does not end. Boo. However, 2025 is a different kind of shit, in that you can tell the tide is shifting and it's kind of overwhelming and frustrating. And you bet that I found a way to compare this to mainstream music. I don't know. I've been thinking about the 2000s for a bit now, mostly because of how much worse it was than I remember, but also because of what happened. From 1992 to 1998, it was an all-you-can-eat buffet for rock music. Whether you were into punk, metal, alternative, grunge, dance, shoegaze, psych, indie, industrial, geology, or whatnot, you could find a piece of it in mainstream rock radio. Generally speaking, of course. But in 2000, something switched. How the hell do we wind up like this? It's hard to say what, but after nu metal took over and produced some mixed responses, rock radio started to move towards a very specific sound. Granted, rock radio was always biased towards pop accessible stuff. However, for a time, the community of rock fractured and some sub-communities wouldn't dive into others. Avenged Sevenfold fans didn't listen to Arcade Fire, or Metallica fans didn't listen to Swans or something. Spoon didn't listen to Fork. This also became clear as rock radio fixated on a small pool of boring identical cock rock. Cunt rock, as I call it. Nickelback, Coldplay, or The Calling. Basically, pop-accessible rock music for nobody. Nickelback got a lot of flack for this, despite it being mostly Coldplay's fault and no one likes The Calling. I do, you don't count. What's funny is that I actually like a lot of these hits. Clocks, Someday, and How You Remind Me. Not Wherever You Will Go, that song is god-awful. However, going from Nine Inch Nails, Saliva, Bowling for Soup, and Metallica to The Calling in 9 Days has implications. Why am I thinking about fracturing, you may ask? You may not ask? Have you noticed everything is crumbling? Culturally, I should clarify. That Carl's Jr. across the street I keep trying to burn down is still intact. Pop music is divided between casual muzak, diva pop, radio, and stan groups. Hip-hop is divided between old head incumbents like Clips and newer popular acts between the wave of women and Travis Scott alikes. Rock music is having its split as the art punk boom moves between a more experimental underground and softer indie rock. The only intact group I found was no wave and noise rock, and those groups are always intact. Actually, that's not true. Electronic core is the only genre because a lot of outsider artists tend to congregate there. Lots of independent plazas like Bandcamp are in the music industry's grasp and are touting money. Good for you, BC. And there's a cultural shift between the old you can't fix what's broken and the younger we have to push for something because this doesn't work. I'm being vague, but there's something shifting, and it is one large iceberg calving. If you've never seen it, the bigger the iceberg, the longer the calving. Hence why this 2000s shift is on my mind. The divide in rock radio happened mostly due to the music industry's slip in revenue and profits. Thanks to their inability to control and catch MP3 pirating and make the format illegal like they did for the previous technologies, the upward trajectory the monopolies had in the 90s died with Kazaa, LimeWire, and Napster, see Weird Al's joke song that you had to download, along with some generally dated ideas of what MP3s and music pirating meant for people. It was a long waste of time, and this slip led the industry to curate more boring artists. The rockist spirit that exploded out of the 60s and 70s had grown old and jaded by the aughts. In 2009, poptimism became the dominant form of music discussion, and rock music entered the lag-old jazz era of underground intrigues until 2019, and a slight return in 2020. Indie rock only passed through the 2010s through fluke indie hits from Walk the Moon and Foster the People's hits. Maroon 5 and Imagine Dragons went commercial. Hip-hop is going through a similar shift where the gatekeepers aren't taking to what youngins are listening to, even as women in hip-hop lead this newer age because they're used to the old format that bolstered Travis Scott and Playboi Carti, along with older figures going under due to scandals and disagreements with newer folks. Rock came back in 2019 through nostalgia as Tool and Slipknot got the spotlight for late-age releases that were both cromulent. In the streaming era, older music has managed to wriggle its way into the main light. Lots of newer music doesn't really cross through because people tend to listen to older deep cuts through playlists or the nostalgia cycle. Older music also does much better in streaming, so lots of younger people listen to it since it's more accessible than ever. Paired with the devaluement of music through streaming, along with the long-standing boycott that died in 2018, once bands eventually lost interest in fighting the streaming war.
It devalues music generally. I mean, it makes music disposable. And we had we talked to our various labels and tried to get off Spotify a few years ago, and no one really wanted to do it. I mean, the reason for us at the time was just we thought that they just treated bands badly. But when the announcement came that this Spotify head Daniel Ek was using Spotify funds to directly invest in AI war murder drones, there was just, I mean, it was no conceivable way that we could be involved in something like that.
A lot of newer music makes less money and gets less attention. For the record, I still think streaming itself is a good technology, but the issue is that most label monopolies want as much of the revenue as possible for profits. Artists don't get paid, and that pairs nicely with Spotify's recent boycott, as their CEO directly funds military weaponry, just like all the major CEOs. I'm moving to Tidal as of now, but I'm really kicking my feet, but also whatever. I still have Bandcamp, but it's expensive, and I'm distant. Older music and older curators aren't really interacting with younger curators, who also aren't looking for older classics. The few who do get little attention, so you have hype curators who treat every major release like cocaine, or old heads like Polyphonic. And hey, it doesn't matter that much. Music doesn't have to be a monoculture, it can be a bunch of branches and that's fine. There are always going to be great singular releases that don't really connect to anything until later, or standout spikes from smaller movements. Right now, there's a perception that 2025 is a bad year for music because pop music has been close to non-existent up until recently, despite the great releases we got. And that is mostly untrue. This year has been really good for music. Albums, that is. Singles or whatever. And different scenes can have up and down years. Indie rock is mixed to me, hip-hop is interesting, and I think noise and industrial have been the best they've been in years. There is one specific trend this year that is more subtle than the others. Every year has darker music to some extent. 1983 and 1992 in particular were kind of dour years. Even 2016 was kind of sullen. 2025 in particular is one of the most angry years in music ever. I cannot think of any competition in terms of misery. This year is fucking pissed. Mind the long list, but perverts, cowards, unkillable angel, cursed, oh the ocean, entropy, tears of justice, was I good enough, power sucker, salvation, only dust remains, Viagra boys, time travel to save my life, hornet disaster, abomination, gollywog, scorched earth, never forget, noble and godlike in ruin, all the dead meltdown is rain, lotus, revenge seekers, deathmatch the film, addicted to the violence, cadejos plus those who pass between fleeting worlds, Blood Doctor Volume 1, Very Human Features, Fairyland Codex, and Yutzer Shadim / Nightmare Neighbor are all just furious albums filled with the darkest writings and nastiest compositions I've encountered since I started album surfing. Being a guy who listens to dreary and miserable music for fun, this year has been exhausting. And these are the highlights. I skipped over some entries. Even the more positive music from Bad Bunny, Patricia Taxon, Violet Pony, Louis Zong, The Weeknd, and Kesha still have some darker subtext. I'm not even including acts I haven't gotten to, like Clips, Somber, or the one hit from Wi-Fi Skeletons that charted because the guy died. This year is furious. It's hard not to see the smaller fractures as either the crumbling of status quo architecture or the start of something beautiful. Communities tend to be really resilient to change, obviously. When I'm not doing what I should be doing, I'm snooping into other communities. For example, I took a peek at the Smash Melee community and the drama there, and despite everything that happens there, that community is still very intact. What really splits communities isn't drama, tragedy, or even abuse, but division, gatekeeping, price changes, and general rejection. I use Twitch now and then because I'm part of the Super Mario 64 hacking scene, and it's a hub we all meet on. Despite the fact that site is god-awful and I can't stand using it, I still go there because I like the community and I want to stick around and talk to people, despite the fact that I'm fucking lazy. And Twitch is awful to use. If anything, trauma tends to glue people together. People get pushed out when they feel unwelcome in a community. Very rarely, even in music, do people lash out. I know punk rock gets written as a rebellious genre, or lack thereof if you talk about it in retrospect, but even the angriest of punk rock from the Slits, Sex Pistols, or Dead Kennedys cannot match the kind of vile seething that Fairyland Codex or Blood Doctor vomit out.
The golden age of our souls and the triumph of disgrace. Howling winds turn cornfields into rags.
I can't argue that it's because many are unhappy about the state of the world because, well, people are always unhappy about it, but there's definitely a more vocal fury about the changes going on. I would best describe it in the nicest way possible as growing pains. We've all had them. They're long and painful, and then they go away. right? I would say these kinds of splits in music history are extremely rare. Rarer than bad years, rarer than great blockbuster years, because the conditions that usually spur them are always gradual. Even the most abrupt shifts tend to have a lot of slow build-up. Only the day the music died and disco demolition were brutal enough to scatter crowds into the wind. Besides that, the spirit of 77, alternative boom of 92, and the poptimist boom of 2009 were all gradual with years of shifts between the blowout. Even the pandemic didn't cause any long-lasting significant shifts in music. On the surface, these riot police scattering measures being employed in social sites to protect the kids, I'll punt that little bitch across the field like a football, aren't really about that. Kids watch Mr. Beast, and Jimbo would not want to lose his income like that. It's about censoring uncomfortable subjects for dumbasses and uptight parents too lazy to look after their kids. These changes won't be immediate, but these groans and growls from the underground signal the kind of rage you're too paralyzed to let out. One where you can only hopelessly watch the people you care about get mowed down harder and harder, all while the most powerful live in the illusion of luxury even as their own are plucked off. Sorry, I'm trying to keep this simple, bad habits. The 1959 Day the Music Died led to rock becoming the mainstream genre. Disco demolition gave disco a stigma that only wiped off in the 90s and fully in the 2010s. I kinda suspect that, like with 1983's darker boom, that this signals a shift. Mainstream music shifts into Kevin MacLeod-inspired muzak, alternative hip-hop and electronic shifts the next stage of music, and the underground keeps the spirit of analog creation alive as AI becomes a starting point and gimmick. Watch Mike the Snare's video on that last note. Or don't, I don't know. I had plans for August to focus on my favorite albums. As I was writing out the gag order video, that was when YouTube started to move towards its AI age restriction system, which does actually do something to your client, much to my own surprise. Normally they say they're doing something and then it's like very subtle and you don't really know this difference until 5 years later. This one, no, it does something. Well, I'm not really anywhere near significant enough to be that affected. Honestly, I was already scatterbrained and burned out from a bunch of other bullshit around me, so I've just been overwhelmed. I've only had this really on my mind, but I'm still dragging my feet over committing to any specific change. And I have to imagine that this fatigue towards this long slide into the ocean is probably a bit taxing on anyone. I mean, am I wrong? Am I wrong to suspect that this constant drama and systematic shift towards a more bland, curated internet for dipshits isn't inherently exhausting to anyone who enjoys the wild and chaotic? It gets exhausting starting over all the damn time. Most people can't even trust platforms like Odyssey because a few staff changes and eventually the culture of a website can be gone immediately. Bandcamp had that happen. YouTube isn't going away, disco wasn't a lost cause after 1979, rock music didn't die in the 2010s, and 50s garage and pop didn't cease in February 1959. It caused a lot of ruffling, and the shifts they did cause didn't last forever. But it hurts to get pushed out. I just needed something to hold on to because I wanted to upload something new here. Will this be like the TikTok to Red No jump? Who cares? I might make my own site at some point, but for now I want to plop down and try something else. I'll upload my videos slowly over time because I don't really want to spam this website with them. Probably weekly if I don't have anything new, which I won't. I'm not doing that great, but I'll get over it.